Good afternoon, and thanks everybody for joining the webinar. The title of this webinar is Impact Supply Chain Issues and Operation of Port Terminals Globally. And we have an excellent panel of speakers today. I'll let them introduce themselves, but before I do that, just a quick note on dexFreight. We are a open logistics network, fintech-enabled network that facilitates shipment processing from booking to payment. We're a Florida-based company. We're doing pilots in several countries now. We've been in operation for a few years, and we are ready to monetize on the supply chain issues that's going on around the world. And so it's a very relevant topic at this point, not only because of all the headlines it's making, but it's a very interesting topic for us to all think about, whether you are a shipper or broker or trucking company or drayage or what have you, freight forwarder, what have you. And so we decided to put this webinar together just to give a more global perspective. We've been hearing about congestion in the port of LA, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and some other ports in the East Coast, but we're curious to know what's going on in other ports around the world. So we have three panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves, but they represent terminals and ports in mostly in Americas, US, Mexico, Latin America, Colombia, to be more specific. So we'll cover a whole bunch of questions. Today's protocol is mostly I'll moderate the panel, ask a bunch of questions to the panelists, and then towards the end we'll open the chat box. Please submit your questions in the chat box. Your mics will still be muted. We don't want people talking over one another. So please deposit your questions. You can deposit the questions as we move on. You don't have to wait till the end, but most likely we'll take those questions towards the end. So with that, the panelists, please be prepared to self-introduce. Please keep it short, 2 to 3 minutes. Talk about your company, what you do in the company, what is your role, and we'll start with Richard.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Richard Spohn. I am the Director of Revenue Analysis for Seaboard Marine. Seaboard Marine is a regional carrier servicing 7 U.S. ports from the Gulf through the Northeast of the East Coast of the United States. Our trade is predominantly with the East Coast of Central America, the West Coast of South America, Northern South America with Colombia and Venezuela, and then we do the larger ports in the Eastern Caribbean. We do a little less than 800,000 TEUs annually, and we do a lot of intermodal services within the United States, so we understand some of the issues that we're facing with both port congestion as well as the inland transportation network in the United States that has been rather problematic over the last year. Let's see, what else do I need to cover? That's a quick overview.
Thank you, Richard. Let's go to Jorge. He's in Hong Kong, I believe.
Interested in understanding those phenomena and understanding how people use port infrastructure and maritime transport equipment. So I think this is why it's interesting for us to participate in this panel and share a little bit of our opinion. That's me.
Thank you, Jorge. Let's go to Lucas.
Hey, thank you, Rajat. Hello, everybody. Hello to Jorge and Richard. Very glad to be here. Well, I'm currently the director of Asoportuaria. Asoportuaria is a business union that gathers, or a business association that gathers port terminals in Barranquilla and throughout the Magdalena River, which is the biggest, most important river in Colombia. Barranquilla is a port area. We have currently about 10 port terminals working over here, and a couple of terminals like 400 or 500 kilometers from Barranquilla inside in the hinterland. We are a port that obviously is based along the Magdalena River, which is about 22 kilometers from the Caribbean Sea. We have a lot of connectivity with the United States. We receive a lot of cargo from the port of New Orleans and South Louisiana and from Houston. Seaboard is one of the main users of our port terminals. So I believe we can share some of our experience, not from one port terminal, but from several port terminals that we are going through, not only the containers, which is one of the most relevant issues nowadays, but also with other type of transportation that is also affecting the supply chain in one way or the other. So once again, very, very glad to be here, and hope that the people that join us enjoy the webinar.
Well, thank you guys. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Rajat Rajbhandari. I'm one of the co-founders of dexFreight. So just to keep the conversation going, let me start with Lucas, since he's already in the conversation. So one of my curiosities, like, we've been hearing a lot of news about, the terminals and ports getting congested, with several ships waiting to dock and trucks trying to get in and out to pick up containers, especially at LA Long Beach area, LA Long Beach ports. But you're at the ports yourself, and so I'm curious to know, what are you seeing in the ports that you're familiar with, and the ports that you operate out of? So let me start with Lucas, if you can keep your comment precise.
Okay, a little bit of yes, thank you. A little bit of the experience here in Colombia, in Barranquilla, and in most port terminals in Colombia. We have like 6 different port areas, main port areas in Colombia. So our experience is that we are what's happening with the container issues and the shortage and the congestion. It has impacted, obviously, but the main impact has been the cost of importing or exporting a container has, depending on the routes, but coming or going to China or Asia, has gone up almost 10 times from the United States, which is our main business or trade partner from Colombia. That would be, it has also increased, but not as dramatically as those coming from China. We also have a big amount of volume that's dry bulk and break bulk. We have seen some increases in the cost of the shipping services. I would say double what it used to be. Here is less dramatic because you don't need to move a container. What's happening with the containers is that the shortage is most of all on the container. So in the bulk, once you load or download, the vessel or the ship is free to go. So you don't need to return any type of element like it happens with the container. So we're seeing an increase in the cost. We are seeing a shortage or the lead times has increased. So if it would take, let's say, 30 days from placing an order to receiving a container coming from the United States from the East Coast, now those 30 days could be 60, 70 days. Coming from China, it would be also twice or 3 times the time that it used to get the containers over here. But we are not, as you mentioned, in LA and all in these ports, we are not seeing this bunch of vessels trying to enter the port. and we're not seeing those bunch of containers waiting to be picked up. No,
Okay,
actually,
great.
customers are actually very eager to pick them up very quickly and return them very quickly to the port so that they can keep their business, either exporting, importing. I believe we'll talk about the shortage of the truck drivers. We're not seeing this.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you,
But
Lucas.
we'll let that for later.
All right, let's go to Jorge. You operated at six terminals, right? 6 ports in Mexico.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it definitely has, like I mentioned before, definitely has felt an effect on the terminals. I think that the effect is disproportionate between the Gulf ports and the Pacific ports. The impact being much more so in the Pacific than in the Gulf. In general, this year we saw, the uptick of volume compared, of course, to the very low year that was 2020. But 2021, it's already at higher, higher level that it would be just with normal growth year to year. So what definitely we saw is that not only the economy around the world reactivated, but also, it reactivated with additional, consumer goods being transported, especially to the U.S. markets. The main effect that we can definitely see is, for example, Ensenada. Ensenada was supposed to be a very small port, a very local serving port, for the region in Tijuana. But this one is the one that is closest to, to LA and Long Beach. And this one, well, I mean, for us, it's probably the most challenging, because being a very small terminal and being kind of like an outlet for some of the volume that is actually directed to the California region, we can see that this terminal, works very well as kind of like this outlet that I'm mentioning, right? Of course, it's limited because of its size, but this is where we have felt immediate impact to our operations, and basically this terminal is operating at capacity. The other terminals that we've seen is, for example,
Jorge, you're seeing like spillover effect into the port of Ensenada?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
But this is not unusual, I have to tell you, Rayat. I mean, Port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, this is not the first time that it has been congested. Definitely not at this level. But this is something that we see time to time, whenever there's a disruption in this port, there being a strike or any other, we immediately see this spillover to Ensenada.
Interesting.
Now what we're seeing is a spillover into other Pacific ports. As you probably know, Mexico, Manzanillo is the largest port in Mexico, moving the most containers. Actually, Manzanillo is a pretty congested port as it is. And I think that Manzanillo is actually not getting a lot of this new volume because they are actually operating at capacity for some time. What we're definitely seeing is, the port of Lázaro Cárdenas, which it's a port that has been, being developed little by little for 10 years now, trying to serve this central part of Mexico region. What we've seen for this port is, even though that they have routes that are going up to the north border and into United States, and that's a typical supply chain that exists through Lázaro Cárdenas. What we're seeing also is an increase in all of the transshipment that typically handled by other ports, specifically U.S. ports. So we're looking at a very, very high increase in volume, but it's mostly transshipment volumes that are using Lázaro Cárdenas as an alternative. So for transshipment, as you probably know, that doesn't stress that much the interfacing elements of the terminal, like truck or rail. But we have definitely seen an increase in volume also in the local cargo. For Veracruz is similar, but Veracruz, of course, it's a little bit away from port of LA and Long Beach, but we are definitely seeing some of the effect that is just seeing it throughout the the port system in the United States, and we're also seeing a very high percentage of increase. So I think that the increase year to year was around let me get it straight, but it's a little bit like 20% or something, of 26% for import and 14% for export, which is quite large. But of course, remember that we are coming from a low year, right? From a low year from 2020. But in general terms, we are going to go through. We're going to move more than 1 million TEUs. That only happened once before. So as you can see, the Veracruz is also recovering from the pandemic year, and also like I said, like we are already at levels that we were being even without the pandemic, like with our normal growth estimation. Veracruz is, as you probably know, using a new facilities which were supposed or are supposed to be able to handle all this volume. So even that we are at high utilization, there's no congestion because the port is still relatively new. There are still few terminals operating in the new facilities, and there's no congestion coming from other types of cargo. Just like basically it's a container terminal being used all the port facilities. So right now that is not an issue for Veracruz, but we expect that it might be an issue at similar levels of utilization once all terminals are operating.
So let's let me stop you there. Thanks, Jorge. Let's go to Richard. You operate in several ports, so give us a flavor of what's going on.
Well, I'll be brief in my remarks. We're not experiencing this similar type of congestion that you have in the Pacific ports, particularly LA Long Beach. Seaboard operates in 7 different terminals within the East Coast Gulf of the United States, 2 of which are pretty exclusive to Seaboard Marine. We're the terminal operator in Port Miami, and we're also a terminal operator in Jacinto Port in Houston, Texas. So what we're seeing is just an increased volume, which is obviously leading to some of the congestion type of issues, predominantly related to inland transportation services, which I think, Rajat, you're going to ask a little bit later. The only other port that I think is of significance for us is Savannah, and I think there's a question coming up a little later about Savannah. And that terminal itself has been experiencing some of the congestion that you've seen in the West Coast of the United States. But for the most part, we're a relatively niche carrier in the markets that we serve. We have some very specific ports that we service in the United States that are predominantly controlled for the most part by Seaboard services. So we've been very blessed not to have had some of the same type of congestion issues that you see on the Pacific coast.
Yeah. So let me ask you a follow-up question, Richard. Do you think the port congestion is one of the causes of supply chain disruption, or is it just it's just taking the grunt of the the supply chain disruption because of the manufacturing supply demand?
My personal opinion, and there's many factors. Obviously, there's increased volumes, so just getting on board a ship out of Asia, as an example, has been difficult. And then you have the congestion in the terminals. Like LA Long Beach is probably the one that's in the press the most, and just being able to get your ship to berth. And then you have the problem of congestion within the terminal. So once the container's offloaded, have it available for someone to make the delivery. And then you have the inland situation, both for carrier haulage as well as merchant haulage, where inland transportation networks have been very disrupted, particularly over the last year. LA Long Beach, as an example, if you do all the reading, they will tell you that a preponderance of the issues that they have in moving the containers off the terminal is because about 70 to 80% of the volume is merchant haulage, and customers are not coming in to pick up their containers. So it's creating excessive dwells. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, so you touched on a great point. I think it's a transition to my second question, and this was an article in New York Times recently in October, that talks about piles of containers at Port of Savannah. I think that's happening in Los Angeles, Long Beach as well. And it mentions that the reason the containers are not being picked up on time is because of truck driver shortage. So my question let me start with Lucas, like, do you think that is true? that truck driver shortage has a role to play in containers not being picked up on time, or is it something else?
Well,
Lucas.
I agree with Richard that this is the sum of many factors. I mean, 1.5 years ago, when this COVID situation and the confinements hit the world hard, China recovered from those confinements first than the rest of the economy. But before that, the maritime companies, well, there was a lot of questions about how was the global trade going to recover. So what they did is that they sent most of the vessels, or many of their vessels, to shipyards, to maintenance. They tried to diminish the offer so that they could survive through these months. The new vessels deliveries also were suspended, so there were not coming new vessels in 2020. At least they suspended to 2021 and 2022, and then China recovered, and from all the world they were demanding products from China. So this was like a very big disruption of the global chain. First, everything stopped. Then everybody was demanding many things from China, and those containers were not going back to China at the same speed because the economies or countries were on confinement. Now, what happens in the United States with the shortage of drivers, I believe that's true. I mean, I believe that's a fact. And what this does is that it adds to the factors that makes that the containers are not.
But you don't see the truck driver shortage in your network,
No,
right?
not at all. I mean, we're a developing country, so people here, truck drivers are eager to work because they need to work, and there's a lot of offer of truck drivers. There's a lot of offer of trucks, so we are not seeing at all that shortage of truck drivers.
Great.
On the contrary, they're eager to work and to move more cargo. We had some issues several months ago because of some blockage, but not related to COVID, but because of some protests that was in April and May. And this also had a huge impact in our economy. But truck drivers wanted to work. They couldn't because of this blockage. But we're not seeing that factor in our local ports.
Jorge, what's your take on truck driver shortages in Mexico? Is it there? It's not? Is it just a US problem?
Yeah, I was smiling a little bit about Lucas' comment because it's similar to us. We don't see a shortage in truck drivers, but we definitely see a misplacement in some cases. So, for example, as Lucas was mentioning, we also experience blockage of transport infrastructure. In the case of Mexico, it was, for example, the train services from Lázaro Cárdenas to it was blocked for a large part of the year. And very interestingly, because the volume that moves throughout rail is quite big, there was not enough supply of truck drivers. But the funny thing is that in Veracruz, for example, you can hear transport companies fighting it out quite competitively to get the cargo, right? And they are fighting it out in terms of price, in terms of service level, different things. But in Lázaro Cárdenas, you can hear shippers trying to get this capacity. And what happens is that shipping, especially in drayage, is very local focused. It's not like a long haulage that you may have people from different places picking cargo from different places. In terms of drayage, the transport companies typically use pick cargo from the port that they operate within. So it was funny because once we started seeing this effect, you can see some of the a little bit more adventurous, I would say, transport companies going into Lázaro Cárdenas and providing that service there and helping with that with the supply that was needed in that port. So I think that it's probably similar in the case of the United States, or in the case of these there might not be necessarily a lack of supply, but it's just a misplaced supply and this just relates to a little bit of communication, but also like the ease of operating within different framework or different context that you are used to. So I think that is something that could be addressed, and I mean this is not proper to only COVID crisis. I think this is a problem that is in general in the
problem.
industry.
Yeah. And for the participants, I mean, dexFreight, we're doing a pilot in Mexico along with Jorge's team, and one of our goals is to orchestrate that misplacement of cargo and along with the shippers' demand and custom brokers' demand. So Richard, tell us about what your thoughts on the truck driver shortage. Is it something that you think it's happening, or is it something else?
I'll compliment Lucas and Jorge. Basically, we do drayage services throughout the Central America region. We don't see any real disruption or driver shortages. The only issues that we see sometimes are border crossing problems and some other, strikes and the like that are disruptive, but nothing that's related necessarily to truck driver shortages. And we do some of the similar services in the Dominican Republic and in Mexico. And I agree that in Mexico, we don't seem to have a problem in driver shortages. Now, the United States, on the other hand, is quite different. I think you saw as the pandemic started rising in 2020, many drivers left the industry. It was they're an older class of workers, and they decided that it was time to get out of the cab. And then you had the problem that younger drivers were not interested in that type of work in the United States. So it started to compound the problem of having driver availability. And then with a large increase in volume that you saw as the economy started to recover in the United States and people started purchasing, you saw this driver shortage becoming very apparent, and the demand for domestic trailers versus international containers moving in interior points became competitive, and drivers that were moving international would move to the domestic simply because they were making more money per mile. And so you saw a lot of loss of drivers into that kind of scenario where the money was better in some routes than they were in international containers. So I would say that the United States overall, though, there definitely has been, and part of the issue that we have in the supply chain is definitely related to inland transportation services, both on the last mile, if you're doing rail moves, or just over the road, where we have significant issues in finding drivers and having them available to move the containers when we need to move them.
So you're still seeing that in the drayage market?
Yes, very much so. Even the local drayages in South Florida, the drayages in Houston, and then you start talking about rail services where they're metering the amount of cargo that they can place on the railroads. It just leads to further congestion within the terminals and just getting these containers moved inland. And for the most part, Seaboard Marine provided a large number of our shipments are door deliveries, and at a time when that was acceptable and you had the driver's availability to do it, it was great. When you get a huge increase in volume, well, you can't meet the demand anymore for the amount of drivers that are available to you.
So it's a quick question. So how do you deal with not having enough drivers, owner operators to serve your customers?
Well, certainly, raising rates and getting remuneration for the services that you're providing is one way of trying to control it, and starting to limit the number of lanes in which you're going to offer services because of the inland transportation network that's available to you is another. The old adage, don't overpromise and underdeliver. So we're coming to terms with that in many of our service contracts and dealings with our customers, the fact that some of the areas we can't service, and our preference is to move the box to port and let the customer take care of the inland if they can. Many times we get customers that cannot do it, and so they realize that in order to get it done, there's more money that has to be paid out to get the cargo moved.
So let me see. So participants, if you want to start depositing your questions, feel free to do that. Let's see. Okay, I haven't seen any questions yet. Okay, so let's talk about the future now. I'll start with Jorge. What is your assessment of the supply chain issues, especially any bottlenecks at the ports going into next year, and the fact that we now have a COVID-19 variant coming into the picture, and you just moved to Hong Kong. So how is Hutchison Ports, Mexico, and other Hutchison Ports subsidiaries, do you think they're planning for next year?
I think that for us, it was a lucky break, and I don't want to be insensitive because I understand that it's never a lucky break to be in the middle of a pandemic. But what I'm trying to say is, for example, I'm going to talk specifically about Lázaro Cárdenas. Lázaro Cárdenas is a port that even from start, we felt that could compete for some of the supply chains that were going into United States, especially the ones that are from the West Coast, coming from Port of LA or Long Beach and into the hinterland in the United States, because we all know that those supply chains are quite long. It can go from LA to Chicago, LA to New York even, and those routes exist. And for those routes, we always felt like Lázaro Cárdenas, it was a port that could definitely compete. It was relatively underutilized. There's a lot of capacity there for both of the terminals, not only ours. So that port it's very interesting, and it provides similar lead times. So we feel that after these tryouts, let's say, of using this port as to cater for some of those clients in those supply chains that are in the East Coast, Southeast coast of the United States, we believe that we can position that port as one that serves the American market, and to us that's interesting because Mexico and United States, they continue to become increasingly, entangled in supply chains. So we felt that, the way to compete now, it's really not terminal against terminal or even port against port. It's really supply chain or logistic route against logistic route. That's the real competition, right? And for a very long time, and there are a lot of benefits of using one that is quite developed as Port of LA and Port of Long Beach. They have a lot of infrastructure, a lot of services, and it's relatively easy to use that port in the sense that there's a lot of services in that port. But now that you can you get the chance to try some of these different routes that go into the United States market through Mexican ports, we believe that is something that we could definitely try to work on and try to expand on and try to use this experience to show clients that there is an option for them to use Mexican ports for their American routes. So for us, we are expecting things slowly but surely go back to normal. Even with a new variant, I feel like this progress that the world is making towards is just to normalization or living with it, right? Living with it. That's not the case in Asia probably, but I definitely see that that's the case in the Americas. But with that, I think that what we are going to come with is a little bit deeper understanding on how or what some of these supply chains are looking for in terms of service, and try to facilitate those in the ports that we serve in Mexico, even that is not only local markets but also American. The other thing, and probably a news for people this news you probably know is that Kansas City being acquired by this Canadian company. Kansas City, I'm talking about the rail company, Kansas City Southern, right? Being acquired by this Canadian. That's also one of the triggers that will probably facilitate these flows through Mexico towards North America, and Canada through rail, right? So that's also something that is going to be very interesting. And just I think that is the things that we want to develop in order to continue to develop our business in those ports. But Veracruz is very, very mature market. We do not expect, the ideal thing for Veracruz would be that any expansion that we had planned for the next 5-10 years would come earlier, and it probably be the case, seeing a little bit of how it's behaving. Ensenada similarly is going to grow. We've seen that Ensenada has a lot of room to grow, especially for those spillover that we can see from those ports that we are seeing. Manzanillo continue to grow, although that operation is a little bit more tricky, but it's very, very niche. And also, the intermodal company that we have in the center of the country. So I think that this was kind of like a experiment that we experience because outside conditions, but I think that now is something that we can use to learn how to better service the market.
Okay, so let's go to Lucas and then to Richard. So Lucas, what's the plan for the future or at Northern Colombia?
Yes, here in Colombia, the port terminals never stopped working. I mean, even in the most severe times of the lockdown, our team members, our workers were with all the due with all the measures, they still work, and it allowed our economy to keep moving even in those harsh times. Several weeks ago, we had a summit made by Asoportuaria, and a fellow guy from APS Brokers mentioned something that I believe it's what's to happen, or it's it's what we can expect in the near future. And he mentioned the 3 C's, which is China, COVID, and commodities. So I believe China is going to keep being the main supplier of the world. So there's going to be a lot of activity of containers and every type of materials coming from China to the rest of the world, and a lot of demand, and this connects with the commodities, a lot of demand of commodities from the rest of the world to China, because they are producing a lot, so they need to produce a lot of cheap energy, and coal prices were down most of the years, and now they have gone up because China needs to generate energy so that they can supply the rest of the world. And COVID, it's still gonna be there. I don't see that these new variants are going to bring us in those harsh lockdowns that we had last year. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that vaccination throughout the world is going okay. I believe we're going to still expect some shortage of containers. It's expected that the demand of containers is going to grow higher than the offer of new containers. Making containers is not fast. I mean, you need to produce all of the materials, make the parts. You need to produce more vessels because there's a shortage of vessels. Also, those that weren't delivered on 2020 and on 2021 needs to be delivered on 2022, and this also takes time. So what I personally believe is that we're going to have one year, this 2022, of higher cost of freights and cost of logistics, maybe not as high as we're expecting right now. From Colombian point of view, we don't see any harsh issues related to the COVID. We are a coal exporter and an oil exporter, so we believe we're going to still have a lot of demand of these products with good prices. And we are also going to expect an increase of trade, container trades, but not these lockdowns or not this shortage of containers as harsh as we're seeing them right now.
Richard, to you now.
Okay, a couple comments, maybe a little bit contradictory to some of my colleagues, but I see that the future holds for some changes in the international trade areas. I think China's and the supply chain issues that we've had out of China is going to be a factor into some near sourcing opportunities and manufacturing in other regions. We've seen some of that growth in Central America. The chip shortage and other factors that certainly have impacted people's thoughts on where they're getting their supplies from. Container costs, chassis costs have become astronomical in terms of pricing. So I don't necessarily agree that it's going to be building more containers to help offset the congestion. I believe that one of the things that the carriers are going to focus on is their equipment availability, their equipment matching, so that they can optimize the use of the equipment that they have on hand today. It's basically today you've got equipment in the wrong place at the wrong time, and I think there's going to be a future here in trying to make sure that that imbalance gets corrected. Obviously, other things that are in the digital realm, route optimization is certainly interesting. Expedited customs clearances at origin, at destinations is going to help expedite the delivery. I would hope that port productivity, particularly in the United States, would be an area of improvement, because I think that my personal opinion is that the United States somewhat lacks in port productivity to the rest of the world's. Of course, Hutchison and our friends in Colombia can attest to their own productivity, which is probably superior to what you get in the United States. And the last, I think, Rajat, in your business, the AI optimization tools that carriers are going to have to become more efficient. Our industry is a boom and bust business. Everybody laments on the fact that the carriers are making billions of dollars today, but they never remember that for 10 years the carriers lost billions of dollars as well. So the tide will turn. More ships are coming on in 2023. Very, very large ships. Right now, you have no availability of any ships worldwide. I think Hapag-Lloyd just chartered a ship for $130,000 a day. That's got to be a record in terms of some of the charter costs. That's going to change when the new builds come online.
What's the average cost versus 130,000?
Well, it depends on the size of the ship, but we've seen where ships were running at $15,000 a day. They've gone up to $30,000 a day. So they've gone up significantly in the charter markets. But that, again, it's a boom and bust business. I think that you're going to see the new builds coming online. You're going to see freight rates being adjusted because they're going to have excess capacity on some of these containers. So, the whole theory that carriers have got to think smarter and work better in terms of optimization of the available resources of the assets that they have today is going to be the key. AI, digitization, efficiency, route optimization, those kinds of things, I think, are where our future lies in terms of remaining profitable as the industry starts its downturn.
Yeah. So that brings the question of, what can companies like dexFreight do, or what kind of role can we play? Lucas and Jorge, you know the platform pretty well by now. So what do you think? How can we help? Right. So Lucas.
Yes, let me start. Thank you. Yes, I agree that these disruptions and this crisis has speed up the need of digitalization throughout the port, not only the port, but throughout the logistic chain. Of course, when you have this imbalance, not only of containers, but of availability of trucks, these technologies should help bring or make a more balanced activity. What we have seen, or what I have seen from dexFreight, and what we have seen of how ports work here in Colombia, which I agree, we have a lot of productivity, but we also still have a lot of space to improve in terms of once the merchandise is picked off from the vessel and delivered to customers, or from the reception of the merchandise to the port. In the seaside, we have a very good productivity. In the other logistic parts, there are many companies involved, right? It's not only the responsibility of the port, but of truck drivers, of truck transportation companies, of the owner of the cargo. So these tools could help have more visibility on the demands of cargo from and for the port. And I believe these type of solutions are, they should have a good fit on what we are expecting right now. How can we make our business more profitable and add a value to our customers through these type of tools that will make all the process more efficient?
Yeah. If you allow me, Rajat, I agree. The main thing is how we can provide more value. I think that if something was demonstrated by this current crisis, is that it is, this is something that I consider to be true, is that transport and logistics are not the commodity products that they were once thought. That means it is thought, or was thought, that it can only be offered transportation and logistic services undifferentiated for all types of merchandise, all types of cargo. And I think that this current crisis has demonstrated that there are some products, there are some cargos that have higher requirements in terms of level of service, and also and this level of service in this context means availability, means reliability, means visibility, means in general different things that can be attributed to a very good way of doing transportation and logistics. So I think that this type of platform, what it needs to do is to align the expectation of the level of services with the level of service provided by different providers in, even if it's at the port, logistic, transportation, inland, or transportation in the maritime sector. I think that the digitalization and the platform economies, what they need to do is to be able to match the similar service level requirement with service level provided by different actors in the supply chain. And I think in that, what we're going to see is that the prices are going to adjust into the level of service that is being provided. So what this means is that people who are looking for cost savings, they will probably be willing to move away from very high service level, and on the contrary, people that are willing to pay more are going to be able to get a higher service level. I think that is something that is going to happen in the industry, and I think that the only way that it's going to happen is through digital tools, digital platforms that can allow a more complex offer to be understood and to be booked by the users of these services. So I think that is something that we're going to see once digitalization really catches up in the industry. That is that transportation and logistics are going to stop being seen as a commodity, and more so as a product that can be offered in the differentiated ways.
Agree. So we have a question in the chat box. Let's see. Hossein Davani asks, how long do you think LA port situation will continue? What should happen to make it better? Richard, do you want to take a crack at it?
Yeah, I'll take a shot at it. Yep. Well, the U.S. federal government thinks that they have a way of solving the problem, so they've stepped in to try to help. There's an old saying in the United States, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, and it usually makes things worse. So Yeah, there are a couple things that they're trying to do. Obviously, they were trying to open the terminals up 24/7, but yet, the warehouses and receivers weren't open 24/7, so it really didn't help in that factor. But they wanted to implement these very escalating storage fees as a way of trying to get the containers moved out, and they were going to assess those against the carriers. And I think that's made some improvement. They claim it's a 40% improvement in the terminal space in LA Long Beach. But even today, I read in the news that there are some 90 plus ships waiting to berth. Now, they've moved them offshore so people can't see them off the coastline as much as they did before. And they're waiting at origin because they don't have the capacity to handle them when they come in. So, I think the LA Long Beach situation is going to be around for a while until the imports start to diminish to the point where they can handle the volume. And then you have to work on the inland transportation network to get the containers off of the terminal. You got to work with the consumers to be able to pick up their containers or make delivery options so that we can get them off the terminal timely. So I don't see any real near-term solution for LA Long Beach. I think it's going to be disruptive for at least the second quarter of 2022, if not beyond.
Yeah, that's interesting. Jorge, do you have a take on it? Well, what would you do if it was in Port of Veracruz? It's a hypothetical question.
I think that it depends who I was, but what I would do is just to build more port, I would say. I think that the LA and Long Beach, it's problematic because people are just looking at, the effect that it had through the pandemic. But LA and Long Beach is a port that has been congested for a while now, right? This is not a problem that started just because of COVID. There were some points that this port was already experienced similar types of effects, and like I said, we can tell you that because we immediately feel it in Ensenada every time that it happens. So I think that in reality, this is a port that is in real need of expansion. I think, as I understand, some of the problems in the United States is that coordination of infrastructure development at the port, it happens at a local level, as I understand, and I think that this is a very, very important port authority that coordinates both of those ports. But at the same time, this probably needs, an overarching infrastructure strategy in terms of developing capacity on the Pacific side, the west coast of the United States, and this is similar for Mexico. I think I think that the Pacific side is even that it has been improving through the years is something that is. We can still see that it's insufficient at times. So I think that, I think that technology helps when you operate more efficiently, you improve capacity. That's a fact, if you can improve planning, you improve port capacity. If you can improve visibility, communications, if you can improve all those, it improves port capacity, but only to extent, right? Those are, some mitigating actions. I think that we definitely need to continue to invest in technology because, any improvement is good. But if at the end it comes down to, the capacity that those nodes have against, the demand. And I think that LA and Long Beach is just being looked at right now in this crisis, but it's a port that is being at the, at the higher end of utilization for a while now. And I think that eventually there will need to be investment in that infrastructure.
Yes.
All right.
Rajat, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I would, that would be a nice problem to have over here. Seriously, I would look to the long picture or to the big picture or a long term. And Richard mentioned something very important. But I think it's going to take a little bit of time that it happened, and it's the nearshoring. and it's the North American companies replacing their manufacturing in near countries or near areas, so that they don't have these issues in the future, because we might have another pandemic, we might have some issues related to climate change, whatever. And what the bottom line of it is that the sourcing is it takes too long, and we have found out that it's too long and risky to source most or many of the issues that the United States consume from China and from Asia. And most of it comes through the country by Long Beach and Los Angeles. So I believe if this nearshoring can happen, and I think it's my personal opinion that it would take a little bit of time, then the sourcing of many elements, shoes, clothes, whatever, from many other countries would maybe take pressure from these ports, and then we will have a lot of containers coming in and out of the United States, not 80 or 70%, I don't know how much it is, from Long Beach and LA, but from many ports throughout the eastern and the western coast.
Okay, so we're top of the hour. We're actually 2 minutes past. So I really wanted to thank the panelists for joining today's session, and especially Jorge. I know he just moved to Hong Kong, so he's probably in a jet lag. So we should be fine. And also thank you all the participants. I hope you enjoyed it. Laura, I believe this will be in YouTube, the video recording.
Yes, once it's ready, we will upload it to YouTube and share it on all dexFreight social media.
Okay, we'll start releasing the recording to everybody through our social media channels. So again, thank you very much for joining. Hope you all had a good day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rajat, Jorge, Richard,
Take care.
Laura, thanks, and all our attendees. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.